Uhuru, welcome to the weekly web event of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, bi-weekly web event, alternating with the Black Power Blueprint. And this is a web event tonight entitled How the Uhuru Movement Made Reparations Go Viral. And my name is Jesse Nevel. I'm a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee and the mass organization, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And I'm honored to be joined tonight by the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess.
Uhuru, Jesse, and Uhuru to everybody that's out there. And I would just say that the African People's Socialist Party made the word reparations go viral even before the internet.
Yes, even before go viral was a term.
Exactly.
So we want to welcome everybody for joining us tonight on Uhuru Solidarity Movement's Facebook and YouTube channel. And please go ahead and share this broadcast throughout the program tonight. Share, subscribe to YouTube, and help get the word out there about this important broadcast. And we want to start off by saying that the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is the mass organization of the African People's Solidarity Committee, white people organized under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party as part of the strategy of the African Revolution to extend itself into white society and win white people to the stance of reparations to African people, solidarity with African liberation. And we want to, first of all, salute the genius and revolutionary theoretician and leader behind this strategy and the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And we want to really salute the chairman, Uhuru. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela is the one, we're going to be talking about him extensively tonight, who has kept the question of revolution alive in the world in the aftermath of the military destruction of the Black Power movement of the 1960s. Chairman Omali Yeshitela almost single-handedly kept the revolution going and rebuilt the Black Revolution of the 60s and brought it to where it is today. So we salute the chairman, and also he just had a great interview on the Carl Nelson show that was broadcast on his Facebook page. So salute to Chairman Omali Yeshitela. We also want to salute the incredible African revolutionary leader and deputy chair of the African People's Socialist Party, Ona Zene Yeshitela. Uhuru to Deputy Chair Ona. And Deputy Chair Ona is the the deputy chair of the party who is responsible for leading all of the party's economic work, the entire strategy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela to build a liberated African workers' economy, and who has been the architect and leader on the ground of this project called the Black Power Blueprint, which we're going to be talking about a lot tonight. And this event, like the bi-weekly Black Power Blueprint web events, is a fundraiser for the Black Power Blueprint, which is a dual and contending economic power project in the hands of the African working class that has involved the renovation of an abandoned building into the beautiful Uhuru House Community Center and Aquaba Hall that we have the honor of being in right now, and has also involved the elevation of a 50-foot high flagpole that flies a massive, beautiful red, black, and green flag over the skies of the colonized African community of St. Louis, representing liberated territory, and which has involved the demolition of two condemned buildings just across the street to make way for what will soon be a One Africa, One Nation marketplace to build and generate community commerce for and between African people. And this is just the beginning of what the Black Power Blueprint is aiming to achieve. So that's what this is about. It's about reparations to African people, and specifically to this program, the Black Power Blueprint. So we want to raise tonight at least $500. We want to salute everybody who has donated to this project up to now.
Over the last year and a half.
Absolutely.
It has raised over $70,000.
Yes, so
for the Black Power Blueprint.
Very powerful.
And when you look at this beautiful room, which you can see on the blackpowerblueprint.org, you can see videos and photographs and before and after, and all of just the incredible development of how this room was transformed, this building was transformed. This is where the resources have gone. This and many other projects of the Black Power Blueprint, including getting that 50-foot flagpole into the ground and up, and then flying that beautiful, beautiful 25-foot red, black, and green African flag.
Uhuru. And some of us from the Solidarity Movement had the honor of being here for the flag-raising ceremony that was held when that flagpole was installed.
Yes.
And it was a traffic-stopping occasion. when they raise that flag, and it is like that every single time they raise the flag.
Right.
The community stops and honks their horns and celebrates, and entire school buses of African children have slowed down and cheered at the sight of the red, black, and green flag. So it's a very powerful thing that is happening here in St. Louis. So so we also want to salute the entire African People's Socialist Party and our studio audience, including to Chairwoman Masimba from the Office of Deputy Chair, who's here with us tonight. Uhuru to Charwa. So we really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the question of reparations to African people. And we wanted to hold this topic tonight because reparations is being talked about in the so-called mainstream media, in the bourgeois or ruling class media. You see the word reparations being bandied about. We're even hearing at least 8 of the people who are running for president in the Democratic primary now have come out to claim that they are in support of reparations to the black community. Right. Even Forbes magazine, which is a publication of the business elite, published an article claiming, which we're going to talk about later tonight, saying that the only way for the United States to mend the racial wealth gap is for an overhaul type of policy like reparations. And there was a video, I'm sure people watching tonight have seen this Facebook video of Trevor Noah, who's a comedian on Comedy Central, talking about reparations that went viral. So reparations is out there in a big way. But what doesn't get mentioned is that the reason why this is happening is as a consequence of over 40 years of struggle waged by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party, who actually made a goal in 1982, an explicitly stated goal, to make reparations a household word, to take reparations out of the courtroom and the classroom and into the streets. And that is exactly what has happened. The party made reparations a mass demand of the African masses. And we're going to talk a lot about that tonight and show you a video also of Chairman Omali Yeshitela discussing some of that history.
Well, I mean, that's a great overview, Jesse. And I just would say that this question of reparations is out there everywhere. And if you have heard of reparations, if you're watching tonight, if you even know what the word reparations means, then you are feeling the effects of something that the Uhuru movement and the African People's Socialist Party has done. Right. Because it has forced that question out there. And, I think that what is really critical is that the African People's Socialist Party has always fought for the question of reparations to be a revolutionary question, not a Band-Aid, not something that might make white people feel better for there's all kinds of crazy things that are out there, like buy a drink for an African person, or something that has nothing to do with why Africans are owed reparations, why this is so critical. But the African People's Socialist Party has fought for it to be a revolutionary demand, to go to the heart of the question that it was the assault on Africa, the enslavement of African people, the theft of African human beings, kidnapped and turned into commodities for sale. And, and it's so deep, Jesse, that, we can list these things, but just investigating the question of reparations, we can see, if we really look at it, that the enslavement of African people, the colonization of Africa, the disbursement of African people around the world was the foundation of capitalism. That's how it started. And we are often taught that reparations, or that the enslavement of African people is a sideline thing. That, basically America was okay, and the founding fathers were great guys, except that there was slavery on the side, and there was the genocide of the indigenous people, the theft of their land. But, that was a sideline thing. There was this, we're taught that there was this U.S. economy, and it had some bad things wrong with it. And the fact is that the enslavement of African people, the theft of the land of the indigenous people, and the colonization of the majority of humanity is in fact the basis for capitalism. That is capitalism. That is capitalism's DNA. And that we have to start by looking at that. And when we look at the reality of it and everything that this system and white people have done to African people and how much money and wealth that has been raised, and I've just been studying this more before a presentation that I am going to present this weekend at the USM, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement National Convention here in St. Louis, which I'm very excited about, to really start to look at the economic results, I guess you would say, of the violence that both colonialism and white people ourselves have imposed and inflicted on African people. It's so deep, and that there is nothing, absolutely nothing in this economy that is not tied to slavery, to the assault on Africa, to the theft of Africa's resources, and to the fact that this economy was built by violence imposed on African people, forcing them to work, to be the greatest, to provide the greatest productivity ever in the history of the planet in terms of the amount of resources raised. This had never happened before, this burst of wealth. And, that we have to understand what Chairman Omali Yeshitela is showing and teaching. And the more that you do the research, the more this is so clear. And it's so clear in such a deep way that, that we have to see that everything that we have as white people comes at the expense of African people, and that we do sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African people on the stolen land of the indigenous people, which, by the way, is estimated to be worth $24 trillion. That the real estate that's the United States right now, and to me that seems really underestimated. But that's something I read, and excuse me, that we just have to understand the depth of this question, and that reparations as a revolutionary demand means that this parasitic economy, that capitalism has to be destroyed. That is what the ultimate question of reparations is about. That that it's not a favor, it's not something, it's not charity, it is African people's resources, literally created by the greatest suffering that human beings could ever go through. That produced the ability for us as white people and for capitalism itself to be able to function, to have wealth. And you can't really quantify. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela was raising this in a discussion the other day, that how could you quantify what what is owed to African people? I mean, you can't, because it's all owed. But then you can't. All of the violence, the lynching, the terror, every time African people amassed a little bit of resources, white people came and burnt it down, like we did in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Rosewood, and. So anytime an African person had a piano, or a house, it was attacked and it was taken away from them. And I was reading that, just the violence against African people in the Caribbean, where in fact, 50% of all enslaved Africans were brought to the Caribbean to be in the sugar plantations. And white people love sugar. And by 1860, 1850, every single man, woman, and child in Europe ate an average of 36 pounds of sugar a year. And so that was worth billions of dollars, and African people were producing the sugar in the Caribbean, all throughout the Caribbean. It's British, enslaved by British, by French, by every practically European country had that. Germany, all of them did. And Portugal, they all had islands that were plantations in the Caribbean. And I was, there's so much to say, but there's this thing that I've been reading that the U.S. and Britain ended the importation of Africans from Africa into the United States or the Caribbean in 1807 and 1808. Mm-hmm. But the enslavement of African people did not end until 1865. So what did they do? And this is portrayed to us as, well, this was a humanitarian act. No, it wasn't. Right. It was an act that was, that was taken on based on the understanding that Africans could be bred,
right,
and that they could, that the slave masters that existed in the United States and in the Caribbean could force African people into these pens where they had to produce children, and then when African women had babies, they were stolen from them and sold as commodities, and that this could drive the price up. This was why this was done, because after this what is called the second, slave trade in a certain way, is the second trade in African people, the price of African people went up to what would be $10,000 a person, right, on the average here in the United States and in the Caribbean. And so, it's just so, and this is where, I don't know if people know this, but that, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and that's a place where there was these pens and all of this. There's plaques for that. And it's so hideous to think about it, because you can see the wealth of a city that white people have, and you can see these little plaques that were like the basis of this incredible assault and violence on African people in every possible way. But, Louisville, Kentucky is on the Ohio River, and that's where this phrase, sold down the river, like you would be sold down the river, that you right. would be, that they could take, the children or the husband or the wife and separate them and sell them down the river. But the fact is, they weren't forced down the river on boats. That there was this thing called the coffle. Does anybody know what a coffle is? C-O-F-F-L-E? That is where African people were chained together from their necks and their arms. And there might be 40 or 50 African people, including mothers, nursing children, nursing babies, which they would basically give away or throw away because they didn't want to be, the white people didn't want this to be bogged down. And they had to walk from, say, Louisville or Richmond, Virginia, to Louisiana, to Mississippi, to Arkansas. They had to walk thousands of miles with all 30 pounds of iron on them and no food and no clothing, basically, and they just walked down the highways that existed there that time. And, this was seen every day. This was the scene. 1 million African people went through that in this country, and we don't even learn that. Right. But this is something, this is part of what was called, I hate to use that term breeding, but I mean, it's just, it's so horrible. There are pictures on the internet of the pens that they forced African people into. But I was looking up, I just wanted to say this. So I was like, well, okay, so that's what happened in the United States after, they banned the slave ships from bringing, white people who brought Africans from Africa, kidnapped them and brought them across on the Middle Passage. So from 1808 to 1865, this other form happened. And so I was like, well, how did they do it in the Caribbean? Did they do the same thing? Did they do this breeding? Well, I read an article, and this is really, really, really deep, but it says to me what, the depth of this whole reality of what was done to African people, and what it was that everything that we have is drenched in the blood of African human beings. But Jesse, so, I was like, well, did they do this breeding in the Caribbean, which would have been like the British, the French, etc. Mm-hmm. And so I found this article about in Jamaica, where African people did the sugar on the sugar plantations, that what happened was that African women, the work they had to do was so brutal, and sugar, like, you have to be able to carry, the sugar cane, and it's like heavy, and they were worked so hard, and they were so, basically starved to death because they had no food. They were so undernourished that they couldn't get pregnant, and that. Wow. You just think about that, and how, like the chairman said, it's the struggle to produce and reproduce real life,
right?
And that's taken away, and so the slave masters, the British, knew this at this time. They were like really worried about it because the population of enslaved Africans was declining. But also, I'd always heard was that in the Caribbean, they worked African people to death. Mm-hmm. They worked them till they died, and they would buy another, just like the convict leasing was here. So, I just want to say how deep this is, and to say also that when the British outlawed the chattel slavery totally around 1838, and that when they did that, they paid, the British government in 1838 paid 46,000 British slave owners who owned African people a total of $20 billion for their lost property.
Right.
$20 billion. And the U.S. did not do that. The U.S. did not do that. I'm like, well, what did they do? Well, what happened here was convict leasing.
Right.
Convict leasing was the re-enslavement of African people owned by the states to be leased out to the former slave masters who now had their property back and had everything they needed. And I was just reading an article that 15 years after the end of the Civil War, because you always hear this thing, oh, the white slave, they lost all their property, they were so poor, they didn't even have a horse, they didn't have an ox, all this stuff, and they were dying of starvation. No, this article says that within 15 years, the families of slave masters were richer than they were during the Civil War.
Right.
And I mean, so, this is a lie. Everything that we see, it's, and it's just so deep, and how all of this is just more and more is coming out, and how many billions and trillions of dollars this is produced, and there's so many different ways, that this has happened. I mean, I just wanted to say, too, that, in reading about the colonialism in Africa, I just want to say one more thing. And that is that there's so much to say about it, because King Leopold, when he killed 10 to 15 million African people, and that was never called genocide. It was just what white people do to African people. It wasn't called genocide until white people killed other white people in Germany in the 1940s. Then it was called genocide and became the worst, the Holocaust, but it was normal to what they did. Well, King Leopold killed up to 90% of African people in some areas of the country.
Wow.
And I just want to say that, the Congo, the area of Africa called the Congo, has been plundered for, centuries now, of diamonds, of gold. It is so rich. It is so wealthy in mineral resources that it still has 20, well, I have to look up the thing. I think it's $25 trillion worth of minerals under the ground in the Congo right now.
Right.
And so, when King Leopold sold he gave the colony of King Leopold was the king of Belgium, but the colony of the Congo was his private
property,
private thing.
Yeah.
So he owned it personally.
Right.
And his brutality and what he did, and he cut off heads and the hands of people, and so there were mountains of hands, and just slaughtered people, put heads on fence posts, and it was really horrible. But when he quote gave, at a certain point he gave the colony of the Congo to the people of Belgium, which makes it one of the wealthiest places in the world now.
Right.
They gave him $2 billion for it. And
Wow.
I mean, that was just what they gave him. That's not even what he made from that. I mean, it's all so, we talk about the atrocities that we commit, but when we put a number of the financial value to it, it shows the depth of what it really meant for the lives of white people. And I also wanted to say that, we've been on this tour. We were on this tour called All Diamonds Are Blood Diamonds. And I was looking up because I wanted to know more about how Cecil Rhodes, who was the British colonizer, who was brutal, who colonized southern Africa and Zimbabwe, which was called Rhodesia, which he named after him. And he was presented at Oxford University this award because he was the only ex-student, the alumni of Oxford University, who had a country named after him. Of course, he slaughtered African people to do that. He invented or used for the first time machine guns in the 1890s and they would just kill. They would use the machine guns and kill resistance fighters, and then they would talk about, they would do that in the afternoon, and then they would talk about how pleasant it was to then have roast beef and champagne for dinner. And that, I just wanted to say what happened with the diamonds. The diamonds were on land that belonged to a people in Azania called the Tswana people. And some diamonds were found there, and everybody went there. It was like a gold rush for diamonds. And so Cecil Rhodes was there. He was colonizing Southern Africa, and he was only like 18 years old. And he went in. He was only 18 years old. And he went in to this thing and seized the diamond mines. And the Africans fought very fiercely. And the leader of that resistance fighter was called Luka Ginchi. And he is a known resistance fighter and revered in Azania, which I did not know this. And so after, of course, the British won because they had the machine guns, they had the armaments to kill the Africans, but the Africans fought fiercely. So after the British won, they did the things they always did. They hanged the people, they raped them with glass, and just tortured them in every way that the British do, and that white people do. And so they took their land and they named it Kimberley. Kimberley, the town, they named it a town, and the mine is called Kimberley. And Kimberley is named after basically the head of the British colonialism in Southern Africa, like George Kimberley or whatever. That was him. And he has this town. So that in 1871, that there was so much money made in Kimberley that it was the second city in the entire world that had electric lights on the streets.
Wow.
The first was Philadelphia. The second was Kimberley, South Africa.
Wow.
And today, the majority of Africa still does not have lights, electric lights on the streets in Africa. So that is just, I don't know, you just see the reality of what these things were. And when you think of De Beers diamonds and you think of all this and, what they do and what they did and how, we are complicit, and it's so easy for us not to see this, and how we have to really go deep into this revolutionary demand, and there's no other way for there to be reparations, then for imperialism to be overturned, and to be overturned by the leadership of the African working class, the organized party for, you know, the African People's Socialist Party, the African Socialist International, to bring in and usher in power in the hands of the African working class, the seizing of production, the ability to create and recreate real life for the benefit of African people. You know, there's so much to say about it, and we wrote a book, you know, 20 years ago called Overturning the Culture of Violence. And that had a lot in it, but even now, to go deeper, it is very, very, very deep to see what this is that we're sitting on. And that's why the Black Power Blueprint is so significant, because it is a revolutionary program that is not about charity. Again, it is African people taking power in their own hands. And when we contribute to it as reparations, we are paying back what we owe, what African people, what is theirs. What is theirs. And that we need to do this, because there is no way that this planet, this anything, I mean, imperialism will take the whole freaking world down with it. They have already wiped out hundreds of millions of African people, indigenous people, you know, oppressed and colonized peoples on this globe. They don't give a damn about anything except their pocketbooks, and we sit there complicit with it. Because we get, we get our bit. We get what we want. And you know, so we have to have a new world. We have to be able to, you know, we're not going to lead it, because we sit on this pedestal governed by our stomachs and pocketbooks, as the chairman says. And we have to be able to be part of a future. And we can do that because we have a role, we are assigned a role as the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of the African People's Socialist Party, to extend the African Revolution into this reality built on this hideous violence and, you know, theft of everything of everybody else's, and be able to turn that back over and return those resources into the hands of the African working class. And that is how we can be part of a revolutionary trajectory that is going to transform this world and make it end all of this that, you know, that we have done. And this is our self-criticism, and this is our way to rectify our relationship to African people and people on the planet Earth, and be able to, you know, to really uphold our stance, hold up our heads, and be able to be part of the human family for the first time. So, you know, really want to call on everybody to give tonight. I want to raise $500.
Yes, and I would just want to express my total unity with everything that you just said, Chairwoman Penny. And when you go into the whole depths, and it's so true that, I mean, we can start to go into the different amounts of money made off of the colonial oppression of African people. You really can't quantify it, because you would have to quantify
everything,
all money touched by white hands since 1415.
Yeah, it's like how they say, you know, every dollar in the United States has cocaine on it. Well, every dollar has blood on it. Blood of African people.
Exactly. So, which the cocaine trade is also tied to.
Exactly.
So, yes, so I just want to unite with that, and that is why there has to be reparations to Africa, which is another way of saying capitalism has to be destroyed. Colonialism has to be destroyed, and African people will be victorious in taking back what belongs to them and building, you know, a socialist and united Africa for the benefit of African people everywhere. And we want to appreciate those of you who have contributed to the Black Power Blueprint up to now tonight, including Jackson Hollingsworth, who put in $5. Got us started tonight. Uhuru. And Kitty Riley, who is here with us in the live studio audience, who put in $25. Uhuru. So, and we also want to recognize Deputy Chair Ona Yeshitela, who is here with us tonight as well in our live studio audience. Uhuru, Deputy Chair. And I really want to urge white people watching this to go to the blackpowerblueprint.org, blackpowerblueprint.org, and contribute towards this project. I'm going to put in $25, so that brings us to $55, I think. Yes, so.
All right, I'm going to put in $25 as well.
All right, there we go. So that brings us to $80, right? Okay, so that means we have
80.
$420 left to raise.
This is so little.
It's nothing. So we want to encourage people to do that. And I don't know, we probably can't show the clip at this point. So, oh, we can. Okay, so we want to show you an interview, a recent interview done with Chairman Omali Yeshitela by Your World News. And he is being asked about the party's history in taking reparations to the world stage. So he's talking about bringing the reparations demand even to Ireland and organizing, you know, Irish people who were living under British colonialism at the time to unite with the African struggle for reparations, and the significance historically of forming the African People's Solidarity Committee to raise this question of reparations in the world. So here is Chairman Omali Yeshitela. He was interviewed on Your World News, and this is just from a couple of weeks ago, and you can see the entire interview on YouTube as well. So in just a moment, we'll be able to show you Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
Had been involved in dealing with the reparation question. We had the World Tribunal on Reparations for African People in 1982. 1983, I toured Europe to take the reparations issue to Africans in other places. I attended International Black Radical Book Fair that was held in London, where Africans from all around the world were there. And we published a book, Reparations Now, and that we distributed and there. I went in 1983. I went to Northern Ireland, which at the time was occupied by the British. A very brutal occupation, by the way, something that I didn't understand before I actually went there physically. I mean, I knew that the Irish were being, quote unquote, colonized by Britain, but I had no idea of what it looked like. And what it looked like was African people under police occupation in a very serious way. I mean, housing projects, the whole thing, people walking around wounded with wounds that they had experienced from British. But the Irish Republican Socialist Party, with whom we met, held a press conference with us and united with the reparations demand, and went further than that by stating that they did not want any resources from any Irish in the United States that were opposed to the liberation of African people and who could not support the reparations demand. So, I mean, I thought that was a really important kind of accomplishment in 1983. By the way, the day after I left Northern Ireland, the government burned down their office. And this was a national press conference that we did. And I traveled all over Europe. I was in Paris, where speaking to Africans from various places around the reparations question. So we've been pushing this. And then, as I mentioned, we organized reparations tribunals in various places throughout the United States for 12 years in a row. We had a reparations tribunal in some place in this country. And then in 1976, we organized the African People's Solidarity Committee. In 1985, their primary work became reparations work. That's what they do. And to go into the African community, to the white community, and to win reparations to the struggle of African people. And so that's been going on for some time. As people say, well, what do reparations look like? We say it looks like 4101 West Florissant in St. Louis.
All right, Uhuru. So that was Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, very powerful statement. And Chairwoman Penny, I wanted to ask you a question. So you were there in 1982 at the World Tribunal on Reparations. Could you tell us, what was that like, that moment in history?
Well, it was very amazing because it was at a college in Brooklyn. I'm sorry, I can't remember, but it's the main college in downtown Brooklyn. I know it has a famous name. And it was in the auditorium. There was a huge stage with there's photographs of that, a giant banner
of Garvey.
That says, well, there were pictures, painted pictures of Garvey and others, but there was also a giant banner that said International Tribunal on Reparations for Black People in the U.S. or something like that. And there was, the chairman was the people's advocate, so he gave the basis in international law. And there was also a panel of judges who were from, I think, one from Chile, there was a North American, there were others. I can't remember all from all the different places, but we can find that out. And then the chairman gave like the basis in the international law using the United Nations covenants on human rights and also on genocide. Mm-hmm. And it's not based on the party's adherence to law per se of imperialism, but the human rights documents of the UN were created at a time when revolution was the main trend in the world. So they did address things that you would never see now, but they did address the question of the anti-colonial struggles, the right of an oppressed people to be free and liberated, and to, if they, and they did, the chairman used that law because it said that if a people were oppressed by another nationality, they could bring their struggle to the United Nations. And so the chairman did that as the African nation. Wow. And it was very powerful in that way. And so therefore it was a completely, it wasn't a mock trial or anything like that. Yeah. It was a real process that found that African people in the U.S. were owed at that time $4.1 trillion, which would be about $14 trillion today. And that's a number that's still often used, that you see in terms of how much African people are owed in the United States. But the chairman makes a point in this interview where he's saying that it's not just reparations for slavery. Right, exactly. Because that is for everything. It's for all of it. And that, in fact, there's a way that African people have been, more resources have been stolen from African people even since slavery. Right, exactly. And I think that what is interesting about some of the politicians is that they are forced to, because of the narrative of the party, and the party is the only one who has put this out, they're forced to go deeper than just the question of slavery. Because 10 years ago, any talk of reparations was just simply tied to the period of enslavement of African people. Now, when you hear Beto O'Rourke, he's talking about the prison economy and the subprime mortgages and the taking away of African people's houses and the wealth gap between white people and African people. Like, all of these things are in there. And those are things that the Uhuru movement, the African People's Socialist Party, put out. Nobody else has done that. Right. So that's forced this narrative that shows that it's deeper than slavery. And the thing that is so ironic is that a lot of them are basically saying they would not give reparations, even though they talk about it. Yeah. Yes. But how they're describing the conditions of African people shows that it's colonialism. So it takes you to only one conclusion, that there has to be revolutionary reparations. Yeah. So it's like the chairman said, the capitalists will sell you the rope to hang them with. It's kind of like, they're putting this out to try to save their position, but in fact, they condemn themselves with it because it educates people about, African people are owed everything, and that it's parasitic capitalism. That's the only conclusion you can come to. Right, exactly. And we want to really appreciate those of you who are watching tonight and watching in our studio audience as well as online who have contributed towards our goal to raise $500 for the Black Power Blueprint. We want to thank Lisa Watson, who put in $50. Uhuru to Lisa Watson. And we will see you at the USM National Convention, Lisa. All right. And Comrade James White in Washington, D.C. put in $25. Exciting. And Wendy James Craig. White. Yes, Wendy Craig put in $25 as well as a salute to Wendy Craig out in California. All right, Uhuru. So that means we have raised $180, which means $320 left to go to raise tonight for the Black Power Blueprint. So go to blackpowerblueprint.org and share this video, post it on Facebook, put it on Twitter, put it on whatever social media platform you use. YouTube, everything. Get the word out about this so we can, really amplify this message and also bring in the reparations to the Black Power Blueprint. So Penny, if we could talk a little bit more about these politicians, because that was one of the things that inspired us to hold this event tonight, is something that
really would have been unheard of just 2 years ago. In fact, it used to be normal for politicians to establish their legitimacy by denouncing reparations. Barack Obama was the first one to denounce reparations in order to make clear.
Bernie Sanders.
Oh yes, and Bernie is still denouncing reparations. He didn't get the memo that you need to at least pretend like you support reparations. So anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have 8 candidates, right? And
but there were 2 candidates that, that just forced this on to the world stage, and they were, candidates of the Uhuru movement, of the African People's Socialist Party, and they were Akile Anai, who is the director of Agitprop for the African People's Socialist Party, who ran for District 6 City Council in St. Petersburg, and Jesse Nevel, who ran for mayor in St. Pete. It's such an amazing job. Who that you really raised this question of reparations in a profound way, and in a way that nobody had seen yet. But then it just caught like wildfire on. And there was talk about the attack in city council that went viral.
Yes. So the Uhuru movement made reparations go viral literally in 2017 with that campaign. And before I get to that, I just want to say that was an extremely powerful campaign, and that's true. That was the original. That was the first time you saw people running for office who campaigned on a platform of reparations. That was the first time, and that was the strategy and genius of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who saw this coming. He always does. I mean, if you didn't have materialism, you would think he was some kind of prophet, because he can just predict what's going to happen. But it's science. It's the science of African internationalism. And he is the one who laid out this strategy to run Akile Anai, amazing, brilliant, absolutely brilliant candidate for District 6 City Council, the director of Agitprop, who ran on the platform Radical Times, Radical Solutions, putting out reparations, economic development, Black community control of the police, all of these things were out there, and also running myself, as part of the solidarity movement, and in a majority white city on a platform of reparations. And I remember when we first started, there were people, including people in my family and stuff, who were like, well, I think what you're doing is great, but I would really discourage you from talking so much about reparations. Like, you might want to tone the reparations talk down a little bit. Maybe you shouldn't make that the main thing. Can you call it something else? And we're like, no, it's very important that we have reparations. And now look what's happening.
Exactly.
So yeah, and then
it's the number one issue.
Number one issue, exactly. Even the ones who are against reparations have to make it sound like they're for reparations.
Yeah.
Cory Booker is against reparations, but he just introduced a bill on the Senate to open up a study into the possibility of reparations.
And he knows that that's what he needs to try to get elected president or whatever.
He's not for reparations, but he's for studying it. And we were going to...
Which is what it's been all along.
Exactly. And Beto O'Rourke, a video of him went viral. He was being asked, by an African man, why should I vote for you if you don't support reparations? And his response sounded like he was straight from the pages of Overturning the Culture of Violence. It sounded like a solidarity, Uhuru solidarity movement presentation that we give. Exactly.
He's laying out all these statistics that we put out that show and prove colonialism.
Exactly.
And you're like, wow, I didn't even realize. Jesse had to tell me, oh no, he's against reparations.
Yeah, you would think he was. You would think he was for reparations, but he's not. He's using the language he's basically making the case for reparations, but against reparations, and for voting for Beto. So anyway, but what you were referring to is in one of the mayoral debates, we were running against the two millionaire candidates, and then there was another minor candidate who was actually just like a kook. Like he was not actually a candidate, but he happened to show up for the debate that day. His name was Paul Kangemi.
He was a kook, but he really stated what everybody else was
thinking.
He did.
In fact, Kreisman shakes his hand at the end of the debate. We had footage of that we ended up using, but at the end of the debate, and I was in the green room with the candidates before the debate, and they all loved this guy. They were shaking his hand, complimenting his hideous fashion sense and whatever. So But then when they got out there, yeah, exactly. He said what was on their minds. And what he said was, to me, he goes, your people want reparations, which he didn't mean like white people. He meant the Uhuru movement. You want reparations. You already got your reparations in the form of Barack Hussein Obama. Okay, so that's what he said. And then that clip went viral. And unfortunately, the bourgeois media rarely mentioned who he was talking to in that. They were just like, look at this crazy guy in Florida. But they didn't mention that there was a white person under the leadership of the Uhuru movement running on a reparations platform. But that did go viral, and it did actually get publicity for our campaigns. The Washington Post did an article about it. The Breakfast Club did a whole show about it. The Breakfast Club interview with Kamala Harris is where this whole thing started, with reparations being talked about in this presidential race.
That's right.
Because the guy, Charlemagne the God is the name he goes by. He's the main interviewer on the Breakfast Club, who talked about our campaigns 2 years ago. He asked her, what about reparations? Do you support reparations? So that's obviously the influence of the party's campaigns that happened 2 years ago.
Totally.
Uhuru.
So,
Yeah.
powerful.
And we want to thank those of you who voted for us in St. Pete. Thank you, all of you. And also those of you who are watching tonight and who have contributed. Janice Cant put in $50. Uhuru to Janice. 270 left to go. And we have about 15 minutes to do that. So we really want to encourage people to go ahead and put in your contributions. Uhuru. So, Chairwoman Penny.
Yes.
I was wondering if we could discuss a little bit about this Forbes article that came out. So, first of all, what do you make of Forbes magazine coming out in favor of reparations?
Well, I thought it was very interesting. I don't have it right in front of me, unfortunately, but I thought they had a lot. Again, I thought that actually Beto O'Rourke's presentation also was based in that, because they had a lot of statistics, again, statistics we use.
Right.
And I thought it was interesting to see a capitalist sort of analysis of the economic situation that African people face. And he showed all of the ways that colonialism, he didn't use the word colonialism, but he showed all the ways that colonialism impacts the lives of African people that mean they could never, quote, catch up with white people. And he didn't use the terms like social wealth that we have and stolen labor and, all of this. But he did put out statistics that in fact we do use. And, I think that he could talk about it in a cold, detached, sort of financial way, but there's no sense. I mean, the reality of this in terms of what African people have experienced and do continue to experience, what colonialism means, just the incredible day-to-day terror and suffering and just in every front of life of African people, that's not in there.
Right.
The lynchings, the terror, all of the things that we have done that used African people as a way for us, by any means necessary to get what we wanted.
Right.
And whether it's stealing their babies and selling their babies, or lynching African women, or the rape, or just what this society, this colonialism does to African men, to such an extent that 1.5 million African men are, quote, missing from society. To understand what that means, the human face of it is not there.
No, not at all.
But the economic analysis of it was interesting, and it's definitely forced by the chairman and the whole theory of African internationalism and the question of parasitic capitalism, that capitalism was born at the expense of African people. You're starting to see that reflected in more and more economic analysis that is coming out today.
Right. And actually, we do have some
I would
excerpts
say
from
stolen.
it. Right, definitely.
Stolen from the chairman. One more thing.
The headline of the article was only...
Dylan Voss.
Oh, all right. We have another donation.
Uhuru,
Dylan Voss,
$25.
Uhuru.
Woo! And you can
Uhuru.
see Dylan Voss on Facebook
Yes.
giving a statement
And
about the Uhuru Solidarity Movement Convention.
We have we have some comments, so we want to please send in your questions. By the way, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube,
Yes.
send in your questions. We want to take a few minutes, about 10 minutes, for any Q&A. And we have a few comments. Abdullah is watching, so Uhuru to Abdullah, which says Uhuru.
And we'll see Abdullah at the USM convention
yes,
this week.
day one of the USM convention
And Malika.
this upcoming weekend. And Malika,
Uhuru.
and Charwa,
Salute.
and President
to
Colin
Charwa,
Bai.
yeah.
It's going to be very powerful. KC on YouTube, KC is our engineer here, Uhuru KC, says, I support the Black Power Blueprint as a stand of reparations. It makes real, unlike the ways the Democratic Party candidates are talking about, like it's some kind of welfare. And Jason Rodriguez says, I didn't agree with Bernie's opinion on reparations. I think he understands, but I don't think he believes there's the will. Because of your campaign, your video on reparations, which I have agreed with for years, I started getting into what you guys were talking about. So I think it was successful. The Democratic Party would never listen when I brought that up. Uhuru. All right, Jason. Jason Rodriguez. I think Jason Rodriguez is in Tampa. I remember Jason from the campaign in St. Pete.
All right. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he came around. He was
Yeah.
part of the campaign.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we have from Abdullah a statement: no greater debt has ever been owed other than the
True.
debt owed to African people.
Uhuru.
Nevertheless,
Well said.
the destruction of our people, land, and culture can never be repaired. Whatever is ultimately given us will only be a mere pittance of what is really owed to us. Uhuru. And ultimately, it will be the African Revolution that will set the terms, settle the debt.
Yes.
Uhuru. Thank you, Abdullah. And we want to, again, encourage anyone who's watching to send in your comments or questions before we adjourn tonight. And to go to blackpowerblueprint.org because we are, by the way, we're past the halfway point. We've raised $255. So, Uhuru.
Uhuru.
So that means we're just a little over the halfway mark. We need to raise another $245.
We need to.
We need it. We need to bring in the reparations.
Let me see. What would cost $245? If you wanted to get foils in your hair to have coloring, that would cost about $200.
If you wanted to get...
Most white women would never think twice about that.
If you wanted to get 2 tickets to a bad white music festival...
Yeah.
That would probably run you about $240.
Horrible music that's like fingernails on top.
A lot of things.
True.
A night out at a fancy restaurant. $245. And this is going to tangible, concrete, positive programs of African self-determination and economic development that are already transforming the conditions and function as a beacon of hope for this deeply impoverished African working class community in North St. Louis.
Uhuru,
and it's not just about St. Louis. It's tied to a whole global strategy of the African People's Socialist Party to build political and economic power in the hands of the African working class. That's reparations. That's what reparations looks like.
And I think it's so important because we see, if we look at the world as it really is, we look at the truth about history and our role in it, and we see, the attacks on African women and what was done in so many ways and so many fronts at African women. But to see the leadership of Deputy Chairwoman Yeshitela and the leadership of African women in the African People's Socialist Party, which is so powerful. The brilliance, the genius, and the leadership of African working class women in the African Revolution.
Yes.
It's this is the rebirth of just of Africa and African people, and this movement is so beautiful and so powerful. Definitely. And it's winning, and that's the thing. And so, get on the winning side.
Get on the winning team.
Get on the winning team. And need to be on there and get over depression and drug addiction and alcoholism and all the things that we do
Yes.
So we need to
Yes.
be on the forward side of history in the truest way.
And we know there are millions of white people who can hear this message today. The Democratic Party knows it, and they're coming after the Uhuru Solidarity Movement's base, as Chairman has said. So we need to beat them to the punch. And all those millions of white people who they're trying to attract to the voting booth with this newly found belief in reparations to African people, those are our potential members that we have to win
That's
to
right.
the real struggle for reparations under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And we know there are millions of people like Colin Cabe in Seattle who came to the Day of Reparations to African people. Yep.
Uhuru.
Who gave $50 tonight.
All
Uhuru.
right. Woo!
So that means we only have $195, less than $200 left to raise.
Could
Let's
somebody
do
put
it.
in that 95?
Get it down, just bump it down to 100, put in the 95.
Yeah. Seattle. Somebody else in Seattle.
Somebody else in Seattle. Glad to know that
San
comrades are
Francisco.
watching from Seattle.
All right.
Uhuru. All right. So, yes, Chairwoman Penny.
No,
Okay.
I'm good.
So we wanted to, we're going to be closing out soon. So we wanted to make some announcements.
Okay.
And
So a very exciting weekend coming up.
we do. The main announcement is that this weekend, and please feel free to interrupt me throughout these announcements by going to blackpowerblueprint.org and
Jason wants
Yes.
to know if the Reparations Tribunal could be explained. Well, the African People's Socialist Party held the reparations tribunals based on this international law that we talked about, the right of African people to put their, a colonial government on trial.
yes.
And to use international law to do that. The chairman did that, and it was so brilliant. He was so brilliant. And his statement is really profound. And he showed that, first of all, that African people are colonized, do not have power, but also that the U.S. owes reparations and committed genocide, is guilty of genocide against African people. But this was a process where there were judges, a panel of judges from around the world who came to this, and then there was all kinds of people who gave testimony, including Afeni Shakur, who was Tupac Shakur's mother,
Right.
and who had been a Panther 21.
Yep.
Who she testified. Leonard Jeffries testified there. Mafundi Lake, who was a political prisoner, testified there. Akil Al-Jundi, who had been at Attica, a prisoner from Attica, who testified there. So it was historic. And people testified on the different conditions that they faced in their particular lives as colonial subjects due to the United States government, the colonialism. So it was several days, well, it was at least 2 days of testimony, and it was something that, came up with the absolute verdict that the U.S. is guilty of genocide, owes reparations, and that African people have a right to be free and liberated. So it was very powerful, and the party held 12, though they held similar hearings based on those findings and decisions of that court for over 12 times, 12 or 13 times, again, with other testimony, other people testimony, and other kinds of focuses and conditions of African people that they were facing. So it was really powerful, and it was in New York. It was in London. It was held in Baltimore, in Oakland, California, many cities throughout the U.S. and London as well.
Very powerful history.
Yeah.
So we also have a couple of donations we wanted to appreciate. Jackson Hollingsworth put in another $5. Uhuru Jackson. The Secretary General of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Allison Haney, put in $25. Uhuru.
All right.
And Comrade KC Mackey, right here in the room with us, put in $15. Uhuru KC.
Ooh.
That means we have a mere $150. That's 3 people doing $50 each.
Oh, yeah. We can do this.
That's it.
We can do this.
So we also wanted to
Let's do this tonight.
Let's do it. Let's do this. $150. Go to blackpowerblueprint.org. And we do have 2 questions, or a comment and a question. Lisa Watson says, I love this breakdown of the mainstream media's and politicians' lip service to African people's demand for reparations. Thanks for this program and the opportunity to be a part of this movement for true reparations tied to and accountable to the African liberation movement. And then Wendy Craig asks, can you discuss white NBA player Kyle Kroger's article on privilege, which is trending? It would be an opportunity for USM to write a response piece. It's gaining attention. I have not seen it.
I haven't seen it either.
But
I didn't know about
I
that.
will look at it.
I mean, you know, they use the term privilege when we're talking about racism, and racism is nothing. It's just the ideology of capitalism.
Right.
And to change the ideas in white people's heads is not going to change the conditions that African people face. But
Yes.
the whole racism line often talks about white privilege.
Yes, exactly.
What we understand from African internationalism and the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela is that this is colonialism. This is the political and economic oppression of a whole people by another people, by an alien state power and the entire colonizer population, which is us as white people. And so therefore we sit on a pedestal,
Yes.
not privilege, we sit on a material pedestal of the oppression of African people, which gives us a material life of resources and even the experience of democracy at the expense of African and oppressed and colonized people. So, but I think that would be good. That would be good to write something. I think that's a great idea, Wendy, and we will look into that and read it.
And Wendy Craig has a long history of taking on struggles with opportunist white anti-racist movements,
That's
including
right.
the infamous Tim Wise. It was Wendy Craig who challenged him at one of his little $7,000 an hour speaking engagements and inspired an article that USM later put out that also gained a lot of attention. So I agree we should look into that. And as Chairman Omali Yeshitela has said, privilege is an expression of power. And the struggle of African people, as Chairman put it, is not against the privilege of white people. It's for power in the hands of the African working class. So
true.
Uhuru, we have another contribution. Deputy
Deputy
Chair
Chair,
Ona Yeshitela.
$100.
Uhuru.
Woo! Wow.
Uhuru. Thank you, Deputy Chair. So now we got to bring in the last 50. You put in. It says you put in 100. All right. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
So, okay.
One of our best donors,
Yes.
by the way. The leader of the Black Power Blueprint
Yes.
is one of the outstanding
Absolutely.
repeat donors to this
Setting the standard.
project.
There you go. So be like Deputy Chair. Support this incredible project. And we only have $50 left to raise.
I'm going to challenge Maureen Wagner to come behind me.
Okay, all right. Maureen Wagner has
Are
been
you
challenged.
on? Where are you, Maureen?
That's the reparations challenge right there from Deputy Chair.
Uhuru.
So hopefully Comrade Maureen is watching, and salute to Maureen in Oakland, California, member of the African People's Solidarity Committee.
Go ahead and put in that $100.
Put it in.
Meet the match. Or anybody else can put in the
Anyone
100.
Take
up the
watching.
match called for, the challenge called
Yes.
for by Deputy Chair Ona
Throwing down the gauntlet.
Yes. The line in the sand.
All right, so while you are punching in your credit card number into the donation form on blackpowerblueprint.org, like Connor McGuire, who just put in 25, Uhuru.
All right. Connor, wait a minute. In the room.
There he is. Okay. So 25 has been the most popular number tonight, so we only have 25 left to go. So somebody should put in at least 25 while someone is putting in that 100 to match Deputy Chair, so we end up with 600. So put in $25 or more at blackpowerblueprint.org. And while you're doing that, I'm going to make an announcement, if that's all right.
Yes, Jesse, please.
Okay, so this weekend, here in St. Louis, here in the Uhuru House,
Right
Aquaba
here.
Hall, 4101 West Florissant Ave, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement will be having our national convention, and it is called Make America Pay
Reparations.
Uhuru, and it's happening right here. It's a national conference to build white solidarity with Black power. Chairwoman Hess will be there speaking, and will be speaking on day one, and an amazing presentation that you kind of got a sneak preview of tonight on day two. And also Chairman Omali Yeshitela will be the keynote speaker, and it is such a great honor to have the leader of the African Revolution there to to provide leadership and to chart the way forward for the upcoming year of the brilliant strategy of the party of building white solidarity with black power. So,
and I just want to say, you need to come to the Uhuru Solidarity Movement Convention because this is a growing movement, and it's electrifying to be part of a movement, to just meet comrades and people who think like you, who live either in Seattle or San Diego or Boston or Florida or the middle of the South. Alabama is bringing 7 or 8 people.
Yes, Carrie Porter.
Carrie Porter. I mean, all over. Here are white people who are like, yes, we agree. We must pay reparations. We want to be on the forward side of history.
Yes, I mean.
So this is a place to be this weekend.
I remember the first Uhuru Solidarity Movement National Convention I went to, and just to be in a room with the African People's Socialist Party and a bunch of white people who believe in reparations to African people, who are African internationalists, who say Uhuru. Like, Jason Rodriguez just sent something in that says, mind just blown. That's how I felt. That's how I feel every single time. Every single time. I'm just so grateful to be in the presence of, the African Revolution and those of us who stand with it.
What an honor to be here. Chairman Omali Yeshitela will be here.
Yes.
Deputy Chair Yeshitela, to Chairwoman Simbas. This will be the ability to see this, and Abdullah, Malika, and so many others. President Kalambai of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement will be here, just to be in the presence of this movement of the African Revolution. Is making history.
It is.
That will be in the annals of history.
Absolutely.
In the future. This is the work that's going on every single day. This is what is changing the world.
Uhuru. Definitely.
So we just have $25 to go.
Yes. So if you're one of those people that is offended by the MAGA hats and all that,
you can get a shirt,
you can get a MAPper. The acronym doesn't quite work, but a Make America Pay Reparations shirt at the USM National Convention. So, so I want to go ahead and put in another 10.
All right.
So that means we only have 15 left to raise, and we are talking about making America pay reparations. So we need to go ahead and do that right now and bring in the last of our goal tonight, $500, and all we need is 15 more to meet our goal. So
my $100 challenge.
Deputy Chair is really
texting
throwing
people
down
now.
the gauntlet.
She's texting people now. Get on there and meet this challenge.
Meet this challenge. So the other thing we wanted to announce is that there will be another web show next weekend, Tuesday, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, on Black Power Blueprint.
Yes.
Uhuru. So definitely tune into that. And they alternate bi-weekly on Uhuru Solidarity and Black Power Blueprint.
Uhuru.
And finally, we want to call for you to join the Uhuru Solidarity movement. Go to uhurusolidarity.org and become a member, become a sustainer, and join this organization. If you're a white person that wants to be a part of this, that's watching tonight, and you want to learn more about it, we have weekly orientations, not this Saturday because we have our convention, but after that we have weekly orientations Saturdays at 4 p.m. Eastern time, and you can get involved. You can take the Reparations Challenge, host a fundraiser in your city, host a birthday fundraiser. You can turn your birthday into an act of reparations to African people.
Absolutely.
Raise resources on, through your friends and family, and be part of, like Chairwoman Penny has said, this electrifying, growing, dynamic, vibrant, beautiful movement of the Uhuru movement and the Solidarity movement that is a part of it. So we want to appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight. And do we have any last comments from Chairwoman Penny Hess before we adjourn tonight?
Well, I'm really looking forward to the Uhuru Solidarity Movement Convention. It's going to be powerful to see that for the first time in history, under the leadership of the African Revolution, white people can take the right stand. But we have to be in organization.
Yes.
We have to be tied to the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And Amanda Carlozzi, $15.
All right, Uhuru. Hey. There we go.
All right.
So we raised $500 to the Black Power Blueprint. Uhuru. So thank you so much to everybody. Thank you to Deputy Chair Yeshitela, Amanda Carlozzi, Connor McGuire, Jackson Hollingsworth, Allison Haney, Casey Mackey, Colin Cabe, Dylan Voss, Janice Kant, Wendy Craig, James White, Lisa Watson, Chairwoman Penny Hess, Kitty Riley, and if you wanted to hear your name in that list, you should go ahead and contribute reparations to blackpowerblueprint.org. And if you're watching this later on and it's no longer live, it doesn't mean you can't still donate. The website did not shut down at the end of the broadcast. So go ahead to blackpowerblueprint.org and continue paying reparations to this amazing project.
And there's also an amazing volunteer button that you can press at blackpowerblueprint.org. So check out all the ways that you can get involved.
All right. So we want to say long live Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
Long live.
Long live Deputy Chair Onazane Yeshitela. Long live the African People's Socialist Party.
Long live.
Unity through
Reparations.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.